It's a great pleasure this evening to welcome, in my estimation, a great human rights campaigner, Satinath Sarangi, who is better known to everybody in Bhopal and indeed increasingly around the world as Sathyu. For the past 25 years, literally from the moment that he first heard the news about the Bhopal disaster on the radio, Sathyu has devoted his energies to helping the victims and the survivors of that terrible tragedy and to bringing justice to the perpetrators of it, or should I say exacting justice on the perpetrators of it. As I'm sure you know, Bhopal was the world's worst ever industrial disaster. And I think it's just worth reminding ourselves of the figures here. Some 8,000 people died within the first 72 hours of the gas leak on that night of December the 2nd, 1984. Up to 15,000 died in the years afterwards as a direct result of long-term gas poisoning. Today, more than 100,000 people continue to suffer from chronic and debilitating illnesses in Bhopal. And some estimates conclude that as many as 570,000 people in Bhopal have suffered some damage, injury, or trauma as a consequence. I think Bhopal it's not only the world's worst ever industrial disaster, it's also tantamount to the world's worst ever act of corporate neglect and indifference. And we're going to be addressing that tonight as well, of course. Sathyu has addressed both these points in his life as the founder of the Samhavna Clinic, which offers a unique combination of Ayurvedic, holistic and modern allopathic treatments for gas victims, and as a human rights campaigner and activist. And I had the opportunity to visit Bhopal earlier this year and spent some time at the Samhavna Clinic. And it really is an extraordinary place, and the work that he does is extraordinary. Although I will spare you the details of what they do with leeches, although perhaps Sathyu will talk about that. But first of all, I'd like to ask you, let's give a round of applause for Sathyu from all the way. And first of all, Sathyu, I'd like to take you back to that night when you first heard the news of the disaster on the radio. What were you doing and where were you?
I was in my third year of my PhD in metallurgical engineering, and I happened to be in this village which was about 150 kilometers away from Bhopal. And I was working with young people there in a cultural group. And then I heard on the radio that there was a disaster in, they didn't mention the name of the factory where it happened, but they just said there was a pesticide leak, and I think it was about 100 people have died or something. So I thought I would go there for a week and do whatever relief I could do, to provide whatever relief I could do for a week and then get back to my life.
And what did you find there when you arrived?
I went on a train. So I landed in Bhopal station. The train, I couldn't find anything more about the disaster because nobody was going that way. And I came out and I saw this thousands and thousands of people in just pain and agony and not able to speak out, cry out, just groaning. And their eyes were swollen up, but tears streaming down and not able to breathe. I saw people walking a few steps and fall down. There were so many, I did not know who was unconscious and who was dead. But I also saw that there were hundreds of people, young people, old people, people from all religious organizations and social organizations, and lots of just free individuals who were trying whatever to help. But then nobody knew what to do to help because they did not know which eye drop to put that will ease the eyes, or what to give them so that the burning in the body, the nausea that they're having, the complete they didn't want to eat anything or drink anything, that kind of, what could they do? And nobody knew. So people were doing whatever they could, water, milk, fruits they were getting. But most people, what they were doing was carrying people into the cars, passing cars. And nobody said no, and sending them to the hospital.
Right. Yeah. Of course, part of the ignorance of it, the fact of nobody knowing what to do, was because at that early stage, and ever since basically, nobody to this day knows what was in that gas, because Union Carbide have always refused to disclose the details of what was in that gas.
They have not said what was in that gas mixture. We only know that there was methyl isocyanate, a major component. We know that hydrogen cyanide was there. We know that monomethylamine was there, and 17 or we do not know how many more gases were there in that mixture that exposed more than 500,000 people. But we also do not know, and this we find even now so relevant, we also do not know that what it can do to people or to animals or to plants. We know that Union Carbide has carried out long-term research on the effect of methyl isocyanate on living systems. We know that it was done in Carnegie Mellon Institute in the University of Pittsburgh. But we went to Carnegie Mellon Institute, we went to University of Pittsburgh. I personally met with the vice president of Union Carbide, Joseph Gagan, and I said, look, it doesn't cost you money. Just give us the information. It will tell our doctors what they can use. It will tell medical researchers what to look for, and whether and how we could prevent future generations from being damaged. And they said, no, it's a trade secret. He had 2 lawyers sitting on either side of him. And then when Dow took over Union Carbide, so we went to Dow, and same thing. We said, you owe it to us. Leave law, courts, everything, just leave that. You've taken all this information from Union Carbide now. Tell us what it is. And no, they won't tell us. And they played even a more, what shall I say, a cruel joke. When we insisted through repeated letters, they sent us a list of all published information on methyl isocyanate, which we already had.
But clearly, the trade secret argument is a canard. I mean, why do you think, what do you think is the reason that from the get-go they refused to say? I mean, do you think it was to do in order to initially to reduce their liability? I mean, it's a damage limitation and liability limitation
Definitely,
exercise.
I think that's the cause. But I mean, there are many other instances. You know about the other instances where they have withheld information, not just withheld information, they have withheld administration of something that could possibly have helped a lot of people, brought down the number of dead, reduced the number of years that people have suffered this torture. But they have suppressed information just because they think it's bad for their public image, it's bad for their legal liabilities.
I think actually it's worth quoting what the company's Director of Health and Safety and Environmental Affairs said. This is within 72 hours of the disaster, when there were 8,000 people dead. And he was still insisting it was, quote, nothing more potent than tear gas, which obviously is a risible statement to make.
It's a criminal understatement. It's criminal because this is what killed people.
Yeah.
And if you hide that, you're not helping people. You're actually making others die. So I mean, the sodium thiosulfate issue. Can I?
Yeah, please. I was going to come to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you explain what you set out to do.
Yeah, which is that within within 3 days of the disaster, a good doctor came from the Max Planck Institute for Toxicology in Germany, Dr. Max Donderer. And he must have known something because he brought 10,000 ampules of this very simple drug called sodium thiosulfate. And he teamed up with Dr. Hiresh Chandra, who was the who did most of the autopsies, and was also doing research onto what could have killed, what gases could have been there. And together they found out that when sodium thiosulfate was administered into the veins of people who were badly exposed, immediately it gave rise to a higher value of urinary thiocyanate. So they were excreting the poison through their urine. So they did it and they found that you can get if you continue giving it for 7 days, 7 IV injections of sodium thiosulfate, then it helps the body get rid of the toxins immediately. So, nobody was sure. So the Indian government officials sent a telex to Union Carbide and said, does it work? Because we got some evidence that people are getting better with this, and they're finding symptomatic relief and higher urinary thiocyanate. So their director, Vipin Avashia, global medical director, sends back a telex saying, yes, it may help, use it. But 3 days later, they get another telex which says, do not use it. which prompts the Director General of Health Services, Dr. M.N. Nagu, whose elder brother was security chief in Union Carbide, to issue a circular that says if any doctor is using this sodium thiosulfate, he or she is doing it at his or her own risk. So no doctor would do that in a situation where nobody knows what is the gas, what is the effect, and what could ease them, what could help it. So nobody used it. So then we had to, because we knew some of the information that yes, sodium thiosulfate was helping. And we also knew that the 10,000 ampoules were actually grabbed by people in power, but they won't give it to the others. And so we went to the court, we got supplies of sodium thiosulfate, and we started a People's Health Center, Jana Swasthya Kendra. And on this one thing, 4 organizations came together. It was amazing. Workers' trade union got together, and survivors' organizations got together. And together they said, okay, let's get together and see what we can do about it, because we know that this works. And we not only had to do it, not give people, but to find, also document that it helps or not, to have its efficacy established and addressed in a language that they would accept, the government would accept. And so we devised very simple monitoring forms, and we had no money. So people built the clinic with wooden slats and tin roofs, and we did simple procedures. We would ask, because we had no equipment, to find out about lung function, what we would do is we'll make them sit up, say 3 times, and measure their pulse rate and respiratory rate before and after. And then before and after administration of the drug for 3 days, and then 7 days. And all of these were recorded, whether they were eating more chapatis than they used to eat, all this stuff. And all this, there was a midnight raid after 20 days of this. And so all these documents were confiscated and taken away.
Who was behind the raid? Was this
the police? The police.
But you think acting at the instigation of Union Carbide?
Totally. Yes, we're convinced, and I'll tell you why. Because, so they came with guns, they arrested us from the clinic, they put us in jail for 18 days under trumped up charges of, what is it? Section 307, attempt to murder. That was a charge. And when we came out of the jail, our clinic was razed, everything was gone. So the first 3 was like anything you do on medical research or medical work or collecting information, it was seen as a seditious activity.
But what you're suggesting here, sorry to interrupt, but what you're suggesting here is that the Indian government were actually conspiring with Union Carbide.
All the way, before, during, and after the disaster. The first thing the government did was send vehicles to pick up dead bodies from the streets and near the railway station and dump them into the river and the forest. They were in bed with the corporation all through, before, during, and after, and even now, today. So, but let me get on the sodium thiosulfate story.
Please.
23 years after that raid, a paper is published in a peer-reviewed journal that says all this data is on sodium thiosulfate and how it were effective. And so why was it we were raided? Why did Union Carbide stop people from getting this sodium thiosulfate? And why were the government officials who were in collusion with them, why did they do it? Because in those 3 days, and this we found from other papers that we got through the discovery process, in those 3 days, their lawyers had met and told them, you have to stick to your original story, which is that the gas has caused damage to only those organs that it directly was in contact, eyes and lungs. Stick to the eyes and lungs story. Whereas what sodium thiosulfate was showing was that the poison had actually gone through the pulmonary barrier, entered the bloodstream, and damaged every organ in the body. And that is why you had these multisystemic symptoms. So Union Carbide suppressed this information, suppressed people getting this medicine, just so they don't have to pay
again, to limit their liability and to limit them. Yeah. So can you elaborate then? What are the long-term effects that you've subsequently discovered that this gas has had on people that you've found yourself dealing with in the clinic?
We find that there are people who have the same problems they've had ever since the exposure, somewhat like chronic illnesses. Yeah, right. These are lungs, so breathlessness is very common, fibrosis of the lungs very common, and plus we find some problem, like pain in the joints was not so much there, so, like musculoskeletal systems. Pain in the joint, one of the top complaints of people. Nervous disorders, like people who earlier had lost sensation in their limbs when paralyzed later. So that we find too many people. What we find still too many is because of the effects of the damage to the immune system, which meant that it's like tuberculosis, you get much more. Diphtheria, children get more. All the infectious diseases are many times more. And in fact, because of that, Dr. Neil Anderson, who did research on Bhopal from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, he says it was like chemical AIDS because of the drop in the immune system. So that was the cancers last 10, 12 years, alarming rate of cancers. Plus, and this is another story that people do not know about, is that there's an ongoing disaster which is because of the groundwater contamination, because they dumped thousands of tons of chemical waste, and just that which leached into the groundwater, and that is causing a range of diseases. Sorry, with and children with birth defects. So, and all these are the public health problems as well as crimes that have not only gone unpunished, but have not even been acknowledged.
And of course, the additional sort of hidden problems, as it were, that a family breadwinner dies, so the family then have no money. So it's all those multiplication of problems that aren't necessarily...
They can't get their daughters married or sons married because people elsewhere fear that their children will be born with birth defects. And so it's like the hibakushas of Hiroshima.
Right. Yeah. We should say, shouldn't we, about the contamination of the water supply, that this goes back to long before the actual disaster itself, long before the leakage itself. I mean, this is almost from the moment the factory was being built that Union Carbide were dumping indiscriminately both on the site and outside the site.
Yeah, and this is what is the chilling part of this crime, is that this started in 1972, so it was all in cold blood. In cold blood, 11 suits sat together and approved a proposal that says, okay, this is a design we're sending which is untested technology. And this is going to have this so many times more environmental impact compared to the Institute West Virginia plant in USA.
This was an equivalent plant in America.
It was called sister plant. Sister. More like stepsister. And also that this is the reason why we had to have this different design differences, vital design differences, because we have to cut $6.8 million in cost. And so what they did was they sent this plant, which waste disposal system basically meant, within quotes, surface disposal. We used to dump them wherever you can. And so it started. In 1977, they used to dump it in 20 spots, all marked in their map. And they would, and then they would, 77, they built these solar evaporation ponds, in which they would pump all the effluents. And in 82, we have internal telexes that say that the ponds were leaking. We have another telex later in the year that says the leaking hasn't stopped. And so nothing was done. In 89, they drew samples of groundwater from in and around the factory. And Union Carbide scientists found that even after several times dilution, I don't remember, it's 5 or 10 times dilution, there was 100% fish mortality. And they just suppressed all this information. So,
one of the things I found most shocking, and I have to say for anybody who hasn't been to Bhopal, it's the factory is still there. This sort of rusting, derelict site that looks like a surreal art exhibit of death in a peculiar sort of way. And notionally, it's walled off, and there are guards on the gate and so forth. At the back of the factory, much of the wall has been removed by people living in the bustees in order to build houses. So children can come in and play in the factory grounds, animals graze in the factory grounds. And on the afternoon that I was there walking around, there were children playing cricket on a solar, I think it was called a solar evaporation pond, which was supposed to be a toxic dump where they would dump poisons. And you only had to scuff at the dust with your foot, and you could smell the chemicals, this really powerful chemical smell. Kids playing cricket there, cattle grazing, which are presumably going to be milked later that afternoon in order to provide milk. Children drawing water from a standpipe just on the other side of the wall where these contaminants are seeping through into the water table. I mean, it's extraordinary that really, in a way, that this, after 25 years, the factory should still be there at all, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, in any other country in the world, wouldn't it have been raised and the ground decontaminated and
no,
everything?
We don't want it raised. We want it decontaminated.
Right.
And that is another battle we are fighting. The government wants it raised.
Right.
Dow wants it raised to the ground and to build something else. And we are saying this should remain as like the camps in Buchenwald and Dachau and should remind people what happens when corporations put human lives and human health before, put profit before human lives and human health.
So as a permanent memorial.
But the contamination issue, I mean, is so spread out. I have had, and the way we found this place out, it's so spread out. I have had children come to me, show this trick in which they put it in a empty medicine capsule, and then you put a drop of mercury in it, and so that capsule goes in like a funny clownish kind of way. It goes. It doesn't go roll down. You know what I'm saying? So, and I asked, where did you get the mercury from? And they said they squeezed it out of clay. And we went there and we found, yes, there were glistening droplets of mercury. There were spots in which Greenpeace found that there was mercury concentration was 6 million times than what the EPA suggests should be the background concentration. 6 million times. We found mercury in the breast milk of mothers in the surrounding neighborhood communities, in concentration that would be toxic to an adult. And we're talking of 1,000 neonates a year nursing on the milk.
I mean, shocking. When you opened the Samhavna clinic, you decided that actually a combination of Ayurvedic and allopathic medicine was the best, most effective treatment for the kinds of ailments and the kind of illnesses that you were seeing. Why was that? And tell us, how has that been effective? Why has that been effective?
Yeah, see, because after the first clinic got demolished and we were sent off, I tried to work in 2 other clinics. Both clinics, again, they won't allow. So for many years, all we could do was fight for government setting up hospitals, and that we won. But once the hospitals were set up, it was just one depressing story. That what we found that because there were no treatment protocols, and whenever you ask for treatment protocols, the doctors would say, Carbide hasn't told us the problems, so we don't know what. I mean, they should have done. Government of India should have carried out research to find out what works.
Or insisted that Carbide.
The
government of India should have pressured for this information.
Yeah. So what we found, in fact, that what was happening was nobody was getting any sustained relief. If at all they were getting any relief, it would be temporary, as long as they were taking the medicines.
So they were treating symptomatically.
Symptomatically, yes. So if you had, and often this was contributing to the damage. Like if you went with hyperacidity, because nobody had one problem, people had lots of problems together, multisystemic problems. So breathlessness and joint pain and hyperacidity. So if you keep on getting painkillers for 8 years, 10 years, then it's actually totally giving you ulcers because you already have hyperacidity. So it was, and steroids, your immune system is damaged and all you get is pumped with steroids. It's further damaged, and more prone are you to infectious diseases. So we found that what was happening was there was just indiscriminate prescription of steroids, antibiotics, psychotropic drugs, painkillers, and on the other hand, what was a chemical disaster caused by a chemical company, had become a windfall for pharmaceutical companies. And at the time we did this study, we found that included among the dozen multinational pharmaceutical companies who were making a killing, so to speak, were in Bhopal. One of them was Ron Polenk, who happened to be the owner of the Institute West Virginia plant. So one wing was running the plant, the other one was selling drugs. So this is the other thing we found, that in many cases, and the more we tried to find out what was the actual best treatment that modern medicine could offer, and we found that there were severe limitations in particularly neurological damages, immunological problems, and endocrinal problems. That modern medicine had very little to offer. A woman comes with an irregular menstruation. All that you can give in modern medicine is hormone therapy. It works sometimes, doesn't work sometimes, who knows? So, and what you're doing is also increasing the toxic load in the body. So when we started Samhavna, we said we must take care that the promise the doctors make, first do no harm, that has to be kept. And we found that it could only be done in a sensible, commonsensical way, actually. It doesn't take a lot of brains to think this out, but that you do it in a way that you don't increase the toxic load, and you try and do without drugs, which was yoga therapy. And we have found in the last 13 years, because we monitor efficacy, we do research to test the clinical efficacy, and we have found that it is possible to provide, and it is possible to develop safe, simple, inexpensive, and most importantly, effective therapies for chemical exposures. And particularly Bhopal guests, we have had very encouraging results.
You cited, when we last met, you cited a particularly impressive example about people on bronchodilators who had done yoga and pranayama, and was it half the study group were able to sort of basically throw their bronchodilators away altogether? Yeah.
We're doing same thing with hypertension and same thing with diabetes, where we find just doing some yogasanas are helping. I mean, we have an ongoing research, and with the preliminary findings are extremely encouraging. And this is actually for a very common problem, and most often a problem because of chemical exposure. And this is to the dysmenorrhea, painful menstruation. So we found that we did a study in which we had some women taking placebo, some taking modern medicine, and some taking doing yoga. And then we evaluated them over a period of 6 months now, 5 months now. And then we see the difference. And so the preliminary findings are very encouraging and marked relief in pain, because we had to make simple charts. Women would describe their pain, like the most extreme pain they've described on. We have a scale, it's called a visual analog scale. Was like they were like fish out of water, as if life would go. That kind of pain. So through these pictures of fish and all this, even non-literate women can chart they keep a diary, menstrual diary, and then that's analyzed in a collective fashion. So those are some of the research that we have done there. But also the other part of research we do is to finding this long-term impact of the disaster. Because again, that's a long story and sordid story. The government was, again, criminally indifferent, and also in some cases, actually they went ahead and prematurely terminated some research, particularly on the effect on the next generation. But we did it with Samhavna and with help from people in McGill University, Canada, and we showed that even the next generation is marked by carbides poisons. The children were lighter, thinner, had smaller heads.
Foreshortened limbs, I think.
And all of these problems because their parents were exposed, though they were conceived and born after the disaster. Otherwise, this story would have gone untold and crushed.
So how many patients do you treat at Samhavna?
We have about 150 people, sometimes more, people coming every day. And we have now five, 6 doctors now.
Right.
Yeah.
But you need more, don't you? You need more resources. You need. I mean, there's a need for the organisation to develop and grow in order to meet the demand of people.
Because one of the things we are doing is we're in the middle of the most affected community where it's severest. We are just 400 meters south of the factory. It's close to the contaminated area, which is at the back of the factory. And what we are thinking that this is not enough, because our community health work, the main idea of the community health work is to inspire and equip people in the community in doing health work themselves. So the community takes control of the healthcare and the health. And they are planting herbal gardens. So what we want, our plans, for which we need resources, is to have 5 satellite clinics, which one of the main functions is to serve as health monitors. that people in the community themselves would do these simple tests, and we have done some very good sourcing, and we've got people who work on this. Like one of the problems, as I said, was we found that in these contaminated area, there were more men with anemia, low hemoglobin, than women, which is unusual picture. Nowhere in the world you'll find that. And it's possibly, we do not know. Possibly it's because of the exposure to trichlorobenzene, but we do not know. But what we are encouraging people in the community to do is to do these tests themselves. Now, if you want to do these tests, you need sophisticated equipment. So something like something that would measure packed cell volume costs some more than 500,000 rupees. So we thought, let's see whether there are things that people in the community can use themselves, and it doesn't cost so much. So we found that another group, a group like ours in many ways actually, they have developed for 1,500 rupees. And it works, and they've standardized, and they've validated this, and this is what we are getting. So now so people will be doing hemoglobin measurement, anemia measurements, hypertension, glucose for diabetes, and for lung function these peak flow meters. And they would keep records of the community themselves. And there would be treatment as well. They have a herbal garden as well. So these are our plans, and these would cost money.
I wanted to talk, if I could, I think it's worth, if people weren't aware, that the amount of compensation that each victim of the Bhopal disaster received by this morning's rates of rupees to pounds, each victim received £315. And a death, or should I say a life, was valued at 62,000 rupees, which this morning was around £780. So that was the price that Union Carbide put on that. But we've had this rather complicated, the whole legal issue, hasn't it? It's been really complicated over the years by the fact of Union Carbide first selling off Union Carbide India Limited, whom they were the majority shareholder of, and who the factory had actually been built by. And then by Union Carbide themselves being taken over by Dow Chemicals. It's a bit like a sort of find the lady game, where you're trying to sort of follow the shell, to see where the money lies. And so the question of actually trying to exact compensation, or to know where to go to exact compensation in terms of the water contamination, has been very problematic, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's on the water contamination issue, it's pretty clear. It's just that Dow is trying to build have these corporate veils in front of it. It is very clear that like I said, from the design itself, it's Union Carbide Corporation having majority stakes in the Indian subsidiary that designed the waste disposal system, and that oversaw the waste disposal system, that received reports about the waste disposal system, and also that commission had access to the information that it was contaminated. So all of this. And then, so we hold Union Carbide Corporation primarily liable for the contamination. But Union Carbide this is by the polluter pays principle, which is the law of the land both in India and in the USA. And so by polluter pays principle, Union Carbide is liable, and then Dow Chemical takes over through the principle of successor liability. Dow Chemical is, because it inherits both the assets and the liabilities, which they have done in the US, in fact. In the US, Dow Chemical has set aside something like $2.2 billion, some $1 billion, for workers who were injured by Union Carbide as compensation. They've agreed to pay damages to Union Carbide's victims because they took over Union Carbide. But again, the same policy of double standards, which was at the root of the disaster itself. They're saying that we'll pay compensation to them, but not to the Bhopal people.
I spoke to Union Carbide in America yesterday and asked them about compensation and remediation, because that's another claim, isn't it? That the factory site should be remediated. And I'll read you from what they said. We have deep sympathy for the victims of this tragedy and agree that remediation should proceed. However, the polluter pays law in India has often been misinterpreted or misdirected. The law applied to those who owned and operated plant sites. The Bhopal site was owned and operated by UCIL, that's Union Carbide India Limited, a separate publicly traded Indian company. With the approval of the Supreme Court, Union Carbide sold its interest in UCIL in 1994 and UCIL was renamed Everready Industries India Limited, a company that continues to operate in India today, and is the company that was involved in the tragedy. In other words, it's nothing to do with us. They didn't say it's nothing to do with us, that's my paraphrasing.
I just wanted to add a little bit here when you said that with the approval of the Supreme Court, it sold its stakes.
Yep.
Yeah, because the former additional Solicitor General of England, Sir Ian Percival, he played a big role in that.
Right.
He was a lawyer for Union Carbide from 84 to 92, and then he set up a trust, and through that trust he went to Supreme Court, and because of his using his influence as a additional Solicitor General of England, he got the court to allow this to happen.
Yeah. But
otherwise they wouldn't have done it because it was confiscated shares.
But we should add in fairness that out of that also came the shares that lended to the building of the Bhopal Memorial Trust Hospital,
Yeah,
which also offers free treatment too.
Only it offers treatment to those who can pay and offers words to those who cannot. We are the gas victims.
Okay. The other, and I should say, in a minute we're going to be looking at a film. So I haven't introduced the Yes Men, who are kind of activists with a twist.
Very
I
nice
think is the way to describe it. They're not just interlopers who happen to be sitting here on the stage. And they're going to play a very important role in this in a second. And they're going to show. We're going to look at a film, which I think we're going to look at a film, aren't we? You guys?
Sure. Yeah.
Can I just before we get to that, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. So there's a hell of a lot to get through, and then we're all going to be drinking some contaminated water from Bhopal. Just finally, on this question of outstanding legal action, because as well as the agonized question of compensation for this and for that, there's also the criminal charges that are outstanding against Warren Anderson. And Warren Anderson was the chairman of Union Carbide at the time of this disaster. And a disaster of this magnitude sort of demands, I think, a sort of a personification of sort of corporate criminal negligence and perfidy and indifference. And that figure, or that role, has fallen in a way to Warren Anderson.
Yeah.
And he actually arrived in Bhopal, didn't he, 2 or 3 days after?
On 7th December. 84.
Yeah, 4 days afterwards, 3 days afterwards, and was promptly arrested.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then he just signed the bail bonds. He had posted, what's 25,000 rupees now in today's?
Yeah, 25,000 rupees.
Yeah. So what?
The same,
pounds?
incidentally, the same amount as compensation for victims.
Yeah. He paid that. He put that as the bail money, and promised to appear whenever he's called, and never went back. So he was declared an absconder from justice in 1992, and lives near New York, Long Island, and plays golf.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. Yeah.
No quarrels with golf.
What would you like to see happen to Warren Anderson?
That's him, yeah, right?
I'm asking you.
Let's ask Mike.
What would you like to see happen to Warren Anderson?
Right. Well, it seems like he should be brought to justice. It seems like he should go stand trial. If he's a wanted man, you know, they're busy bringing a lot of other people in or hunting a lot of others. It seems like he's easy to hunt. So
they know where he is.
Find him. Yeah, exactly.
Not a problem.
He's not in a cave somewhere.
No.
I've seen his ranch house. I've seen videos actually of a lot of the activists in the U.S., the students for Bhopal, who almost annually have gone and tried to reason with him in some way, sit down on his lawn until he comes out and talks to them, or calls the police. But yeah, I presume what happens to fugitives from justice.
One would think, but realistically, do we think that's going to happen?
Tell everyone what the charges are.
What's that?
Tell everyone what the charges are. They're criminal charges.
Yeah, I should have said that. They are criminal charges. Yeah.
Well,
Culpable homicide. It's not just some trivial matter. It's culpable homicide. It's a criminal charge.
okay, so it's culpable homicide, which is a criminal charge, and presumably if the U.S. would extradite him, then yeah, he would go face charges. It's not that difficult, actually. It just takes a directive from the government to extradite.
I wonder if we think that with an Obama government, the prospects of that, or the likelihood of that, the possibility of that is probably higher now than at any time in the last 25 years.
Well, it's probably a higher probability. Whether that makes it a likelihood is another question.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No.
No. I'm aware of having to keep my eye on the clock. So what we're going to do now, thank you very much. I think we should give a round of applause to Sathyu for answering those questions. I'm sure lots of people are going to have questions they want to ask from the floor. First of all, the Yes Men are going to show us their movie.
Right. Okay. Well, we're going to show a small clip from the film. We've just finished a film that's called The Yes Men Fix the World, and a substantial portion of it is about Bhopal, and more specifically really about what should happen in Bhopal. We had the strange opportunity in 2004 to actually represent Dow Chemical on the BBC on a live broadcast. They had mistaken us for the real Dow Chemical, even though clearly we're not. And this happened because a few years prior we had been making fake websites. We made fake corporate websites. We made a fake website for the WTO. We'd been kind of around the world impersonating the WTO. Greenpeace caught wind of what we'd been up to, and they asked if we couldn't possibly do some of the same things for them or with them, because they were worried about their legal exposure as well. They couldn't really tell, what the legality or illegality was of what we were doing, regardless of whether we had the ethical upper hand. So they asked us if we wouldn't focus attention on the question of Dow Chemical taking over Union Carbide, because they were very concerned that Dow Chemical was trying to basically wash its hands of the responsibility of the world's largest industrial accident. And they were interested in anything that would associate the name of Dow with the tragedy in Bhopal. And so Andy whipped up a quick website that on behalf of Dow Chemical, with the help of Greenpeace, a lot of good information that they provided. And it immediately got some attention. We were surprised to find that it resulted in, Dow kind of attacking us, and a bit of, we sent out the press releases about Dow trying to take the website down, and next thing you knew, it was in the New York Times and had a few other high-profile pieces in papers around the world. And the result of that was that it got ranked quite high. Our fake website got ranked quite high in the search engines.
Higher than the...
Well, not higher than the original, but just below. So at the time, the search engines weren't quite as smart as they are now, and so there was still a good possibility that people would mistake the first result for Dow for the second result for Dow. And so they were often clicking through on the second result. And strangely enough, after a few years of that being up, a BBC researcher who was trying very hard, to their credit, to get Dow to say something on the 20th anniversary of the disaster, made the mistake of contacting us instead of Dow. And, well, we had the opportunity to be Dow, and given the wide audience, they said, 250 million viewers, of BBC World Television News. It's the most watched television news program in the world. And so, given the huge audience, we thought, well, what is the best possible thing that we can do in this? And we had to do something that would make Dow have to act. And so this is a clip of basically what happened there.
The factory still exists here, and that's been a real problem for the people living here locally. I mean, the site, I've been to it, and it's full of toxic waste. People who are living in these houses, they've all got a story to tell about that day 20 years ago. Many of them lost members of their family, and they say that they're continuing to suffer because of the tragedy. And they're saying somebody needs to answer for this. Legally, what they're saying is they want to pursue the company to try and clean up the site, but whether the company will accept liability seems doubtful.
Well, joining us live from Paris now is Jude Finisterra. He's a spokesman for Dow Chemicals, which took over Union Carbide. Good morning to you. A day of commemoration in Bhopal. Do you now accept responsibility for what happened?
Steve, yes. Today is a great day for all of us at Dow, and I think for millions of people around the world as well. It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very, very happy to announce that for the first time Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims, including the 120,000 who may need medical care for their entire lives, and to fully and swiftly remediate the Bhopal plant site. Now, when we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and it's worth $12 billion. $12 billion. We have resolved to liquidate Union Carbide, this nightmare for the world and this headache for Dow, and use the $12 billion to adequately compensate the victims.
Jude, that's good news that you have finally accepted responsibility. Some people would say too late. It's 3 years,
Yes.
Almost 4 years on.
When we acquired Union Carbide, we did settle their liabilities in the United States immediately. And we are now, 3 years later, prepared to do the same in India. We should have done it 3 years ago. We are doing it now. And I would also like to say that this is no small matter, Steve. This is the first time in history that a publicly owned company of anything near the size of Dow has performed an action which is significantly against its bottom line simply because it's the right thing to do. And our shareholders may take a bit of a hit, Steve, but I think that if they're anything like me, they will be ecstatic to be part of such a historic occasion of doing right by those that we've wronged.
Just to reiterate what Jude Finisterra, the spokesman for Dow Chemicals, has just said, he says Dow Chemicals now fully accept responsibility for the events in Bhopal.
Great. That's it?
Well done.
Great. Now they wanted
Now you do
radio. I can tell you one thing. We're not going out of business. We will continue to make profit. We will simply make slightly less profit than normal. But we are doing the right thing. We're comparing here, though, the value of money to the value of human life, and there is no comparison.
it's a good thing to announce. For once, it's good news.
Exactly. I mean, how often does Dow get to, you know? It wouldn't be, I wouldn't want to be a Dow spokesperson otherwise. Good. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm going to have a serious nervous breakdown now.
Dow accepts responsibility for Bhopal, spokesman.
Where is that?
In Reuters.
Congratulations, your appearance. Everyone here at BBC cheered. It's over an hour and it's still headline news. Hello, this is Jude.
Who has said that? Perhaps they're not in communication with the Dow leadership. Hello? Yes, this is Jude Finisterra. Sure. Right. Sure. Right. Let me just, yes, could I ask you to hold for a moment? Okay, thank you. They know. Yeah. So now, I guess I just basically come clean, right? Well, I wouldn't say it's a hoax. It's an honest representation of what Dow should be doing.
This morning, a false statement was carried by BBC World regarding responsibility for the Bhopal tragedy. The individual who made this statement identified himself as a Dow spokesperson named Jude Finisterra. Dow confirms that there was no basis whatsoever for this report.
Well, earlier today, we carried an interview with someone purporting to be from Dow Chemical, a company which subsequently bought the plant from Union Carbide. This interview was inaccurate and part of an elaborate deception.
Take a look at this now. Like, look at this. This is the top of Google News. Dow said on Friday there was no basis whatsoever in a BBC World report saying it had accepted responsibility for India's Bhopal disaster. That's a funny sentence.
The hoax was an elaborate one involving a fake website. Dow Chemicals was quick to issue a series of statements denying all knowledge of Jude Finisterra.
Also tonight, backtracking because of this man.
So that is that's an excerpt of the film, which is actually opening in London on the 7th of August at the Odeon Panton Street. 4 screenings a day for a week, and then on the 11th we have another a sort of people's premiere that's a simulcast from Sheffield. Unfortunately, it's cut. That announcement is actually cut down to just a few minutes in here, but. The original broadcast actually let Andy speak for almost 7 minutes. It's six minutes and a little bit. And it was really quite remarkable. It was hard to believe that they just kept letting him speak, but I think they were so surprised by the things that were coming out of his mouth. I mean, he even got to say that Warren Anderson was going to be extradited and brought to justice. I mean, it hit basically every point that our friends at Greenpeace had coached us on. I mean, every campaign issue.
What it cost them?
Oh, right. Their stock actually lost $2 billion in 20 minutes when this announcement was made on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange because, it's almost automatic. Somebody does something good and the stock is bound to fall. Unfortunately, of course, it rebounded once they found out that it was a hoax.
And did you ever have any direct communication with Dow? Did they ever come after you in any way on a legal basis or anything, misrepresentation or anything?
No.
I must say it was a wonderful piece. I mean, you could get a job in corporate PR tomorrow.
Well, it's not rocket science. Anybody can do it.
Anybody can do it.
Just memorize 5 answers that you want to give, and no matter what the question is, you just give those answers. And so Warren Anderson is living in Long Island. Go arrest him. That's the answer to a question.
Right. Okay. Tell us what you've been doing here over the last couple of days, because is this a bottle of the...
This one, yeah.
Yeah, and these are going to be for sale, I think, afterwards, aren't they, so that people can drink contaminated water. And it's very beautifully produced. Bhopal. Water of, I don't know what PAL means.
Yeah, I'll explain it. This is actually Bhopal water. Colin here from the Bhopal Medical Appeal brought back a bottle of real water from, actually I can tell you, from hand pump number 1 at Atal Ayub Nagar, which is of course part of the water that's been in the contamination zone around the plant, and it's a pump that people have to drink from. We've seen photographs of people drinking from it. In our movie, there's a shot of a child drinking from one of these pumps, and it's probably one of the most depressing moments of the film. We basically cooked up this idea together to bottle the water and make it in nice packaging and deliver it to the Dow headquarters and ask them if they wouldn't try a little bit of their own medicine. And we took these fine bottles that were designed with the help of a top London ad agency who volunteered their time and went down yesterday to Dow headquarters. But they of course knew we were coming because we'd sent a press release ahead of time. And they actually shut down the entire building. And I mean, there was a whole crew of people that came up from Brighton, to go and protest, maybe do a die-in, et cetera. But there was no one there to watch anyone die except for 2 security guards who were sitting there behind the locked door. So it was, Anyway, that's the story of this lovely bottle of Bhopal water.
Could you do the same thing at their corporate headquarters in the States?
Oh, we certainly could, and maybe we'll have to take some bottles.
Absolutely.
To the corporate headquarters, or offer it outside the next annual general meeting this spring.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, well, I think it's a brilliant, brilliant scheme. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to? Yes, Cesar.
What I'd like to ask is...
Hold on, because we have to use the microphone.
Thank you. What I'd like to ask is, India is supposed to have a free press. Now, do the press, or have they written about these problems, or is there some kind of press gagging going on about something like this?
In the Indian press, it's still alive, and generally we get quite good reporting, both from the regional press and the national press. I mean, just last week there was a good story. Actually, something good happened in the Chennai High Court, because every time we go to protest at Dow's, they get an injunction against us from the court, and then ask us to pay huge sums of money as damages for disturbing their business. So in Chennai, we had a demonstration in February, and they were asking for 1 million rupees from us because we disturbed their business. So they took the matter to the state, go to the High Court. In Maharashtra, they've already bribed and they got injunctions against us in Maharashtra. But in Chennai, the judge has reported that multinationals do not have a special right over people because they have a constitutional right to demonstrate. And so this was reported widely just recently, I think 3-4 days back. So national papers and regional papers cover quite a lot.
So doesn't it affect the elections? Because you've had general elections very recently.
Yeah, but it's the election between parties who all agree to putting foreign direct investment over everything else.
I see.
It's every party is following.
So Bhopal is actually in Maharashtra or
in Madhya Pradesh.
Madhya Pradesh,
yeah.
That's right.
It's the capital city of Madhya
Yes,
Pradesh.
yes.
Yes.
Sorry, somebody else had there.
I was just going to ask a bit more about the collusion of the Indian government. It seems very strange in the local governments with Union Carbide.
Yeah.
What the motives were? Were they all corrupt or?
One that is started in the context of the Green Revolution, right from the time of the 50s, and this was more by the World Bank and the IMF and many U.S. corporations dealing with pesticides, fertilizers, tractors. So it was in this context. One was that. The other was because of Union Carbide's proximity to the U.S. government, both the World Wars, the Manhattan Project, all of that. So the U.S. For the Indian government, Union Carbide was a special case, because at that time when Union Carbide came to India and set up the Union Carbide India Limited, and a multinational corporation could not own majority stakes. That was the law. But Union Carbide was given special status, and they own majority stakes in the Indian subsidiary so that it could control. So it was from that time onwards. And the other connection, apart from the systemic connection, was that many of the staff and senior management would be like sons and daughters and nephews and nieces of the people in power. I mean, the works manager was the son of the Governor General of the Reserve Bank of India, of the Bhopal plant. Like I said, the security chief had a brother in the government. So there was many such connections as well.
Weren't the Indian government also shareholders in UCIL?
20%.
20%.
This was Indian government institutions, got 20%. And following the disaster, the worst, I would say, the most glaring example of the collusion was the settlement of 1989. So the first in 85, the government of India passed an act called the Bhopal Gas Disaster Processing of Claims Act, or the Bhopal Act, by which it arrogated to itself all powers of legal representation of the survivors. And then it claimed upwards of $3.3 billion as damages. But when it settled at 1/7 the sum, $470 million, and absolved Union Carbide of all past, present, and future liabilities, and also promised to take over any future liabilities if they arise. And it had also actually promised to extinguish the criminal charges, but because people fought in the court and on the streets, they had to reinstate the criminal charges. But that was the way, that was one of the big examples of this collusion. And this is much more pronounced now with Dow Chemical being there.
Gentleman at the back there.
Just two questions apropos the settlement. What was it, 1989?
Yeah.
Did that specify who would be responsible for clearing up the site and dealing with the contaminated water? And the second question is anybody pursuing the ex-directors of UCIL today, the Indian-based ones?
The answer to the first question is that, which was about what? The environmental contamination was not part of the settlement at all. The settlement was only on issues arising from the disaster. And the environmental contamination is a separate issue. It predates the disaster. Like I said, the leakage of the pond started in '82, and the dumping had begun much earlier. So these were not even taken into consideration when the settlement was struck, or when even the case was being fought. And what was the second question?
What was the second question?
Pursuing you.
Oh yeah, they are through their counsel representing themselves in the ongoing criminal case. The criminal case is still ongoing in the Bhopal Chief Judicial Magistrates Court, and they face charges of culpable death by negligence, grievous assault, and other offences. And now what has happened is the prosecution has deposed some 178 witnesses, and now they are the ones, the defense is presenting their witnesses.
Didn't the 1989 settlement prevent that because they were absolved?
No, after that I said that for 2 years people fought, and on October 3, 1991, a revised settlement, a revised order on the settlement was given by the Supreme Court. By that, the Supreme Court reinstated the criminal charges. And then on January 92, the proclamation was published in Washington Post against Warren Anderson, and subsequently declared an absconder from justice.
Anybody else? Sorry, gentleman right at the back there, then come to you, man.
There seems to be some, I'm always confused when I'm reading about the actual settlement itself in 1989. And when it actually came to taking or clearing the criminal charges, or taking the criminal charges away from Union Carbide as part of the settlement, was it some quite low-level Indian officials in the courts who had actually signed that off? Because in the Supreme Court, it was the overthrowing of, or overturning those charges which became fundamental. So could you maybe expand on why they reinstated the criminal charges?
Oh, the case was clear. One was that the Supreme Court did not have the jurisdiction to quash those charges, because these were serious offenses: culpable homicide, not amounting to murder, grievous assault. The Supreme Court doesn't have the powers to do that.
So they'd made a wrong decision in the first place. They made an incorrect ruling, and that was appealed against, and so it was reinstated.
Corrected themselves, yeah.
So I think the lady here had something to say, and then we'll come to you.
There's obviously,
Just shout.
There's obviously very complex legal issues. Who are the lawyers representing these people? Are they acting pro bono? Are they Indian lawyers? Are they helped by international lawyers? I'd like to know more about the...
Yeah. See, right now there are different cases going on in 4 courts. One is the Chief Judicial Magistrates Court in Bhopal, where the criminal case is ongoing. There, the prosecution is the Central Bureau of Investigation. And under a special section of the Criminal Procedures Code, 3 organizations based in Bhopal, including ours, we are assisting the prosecution. So we are involved in every hearing. We get evidence, all that. And the other case that is going on is in the Madhya Pradesh State High Court. There the matter is of toxic contamination, asking for cleanup and for paying for health consequences. And there the respondents are Dow Chemical and Union Carbide and Government of India, and we are interveners in that case. In that case, the judge is basically has to decide on issues of cleanup and issues of liability. There's also ongoing cases in the Supreme Court of India in which we are the petitioner, and there's one case in which we are asking for better medical care and better monitoring of medical care, because it's bad and getting worse. And the other case is a part of the toxic contamination case that is being heard in the High Court. A part of that is we are appealing in the Supreme Court. And then there's a fourth case that is ongoing for last now 10 years in the Southern District Federal Court in New York. And that is a case on the toxic contamination again, and against respondents are Warren Anderson and Union Carbide Corporation. And there our lawyer is Rajan Sharma, who decided that he is going to fight for Bhopal when he was a student in fourth year. So that is what he has been doing since he has graduated, and he fights pro bono. And our lawyers in Delhi, they also fight pro bono. It's only the lawyer in Bhopal that we have to pay. But even she takes expenses and traveling costs, but all these lawyers fight free and very effectively, I must say.
I'm just wondering, the corruption and cover-up by the governments and the corporates is so, I sit here in disbelief. I mean, do many campaigners, including yourself, would you have concern about personal safety?
Do you have concerns about your personal safety, given the enormity of the cover-up?
I've escaped every time. There was a time a bomb was thrown at me. I was on a motorcycle, and it went past me and went up in a big flare. There was I had a friend. He died because of the gas, but I had a friend who at one time was like a don of the underworld, and he became exposed, and he found he could no longer terrorize anyone. But also he had a change of heart, actually. So he became a very active campaigner. I used to hide in his house when the police used to look for me. And but still people respected him because what he was. And one day we were walking together, and some guy calls him out, and he talks for some time. I'm watching from a distance. He comes back to me laughing, saying, I just saved your life. I said, come on, what is that? He said, that guy, he got a supari, which is like, he got a contract to finish you. And so I said, I have to talk to this guy. Like, I just was so interested in a human way, you know. And he says, I said, who? But of course, my first question was the wrong question. I asked, who sent you? And he says, I can't tell you. So I asked my friend, who's a very close friend. I said, you ask him to give me the name. He says, no, it's part of the code. I can't ask him. So you don't say who sent you. So that was another time, and there have been other times. Yeah.
Yes.
As far as decontamination and providing better medical aid is concerned, decontamination and provision of better medical care for those affected, is that all left to organizations like yours, or is there some element of government participation in trying to get that through?
In theory, the government is doing. In terms of decontamination, the government has, in the same case in the state high court, the government has filed an application saying Dow should pay $22 million, 100 crore rupees, as advance for cleanup. So government has done it. But then Dow's counsel comes to the court and says, we are an American company and High Court doesn't have jurisdiction over us. On the issue of medical care, there are, I think at one time, more beds per 1,000 population than in US and Europe. But so a lot of money has gone, but these hospitals do not have treatment protocols. They do not have any kind of preventive or health education work going on. We actually campaigned and got, in 2 hospitals, we had yoga care introduced. And just a week before coming here, I found out that they have suddenly withdrawn that money. I mean, they were paying 2 yoga instructors small amounts of money, and they were treating people on a very large number of people in the government hospitals. They stopped it. So last year, we had a very long and protracted battle on the issue of medical care of the people. And 52 of us walked from Bhopal to Delhi, a distance of 800 kilometers over 37 days. And we sat on the streets of Delhi for 6 months. And we did all kinds of actions to draw the Prime Minister's attention. 40 people, including about 20 children, went and locked themselves to the Prime Minister's fence. 30 women went, along with children, went and did a dine in front of the Prime Minister's office. They were arrested and sent to the maximum security jail, Tihar jail, and kept there for 11 days. And after all of this, and after 22 days of fasting by a group of 8 of us, finally the Prime Minister said, okay, we'll give you what you want. And what we wanted was an empowered commission. Because we said the government hasn't done anything all these years. So why don't people who actually want to help, who have the competence, and this group gets the money, and this group has the powers to summon documents or summon people and can do the work. And the Prime Minister agreed that yes, an empowered commission will be set up. So we presented a draft of what we wanted, and the government presented a draft in response to that, which was, I must say, in many ways pretty close to what we wanted, and that was promised. And then it was approved by the Ministry of Law, by the Ministry of Finance, by the Ministry of Environment and Forests, by the Ministry of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, and the Planning Commission. And the one agency that is holding it back, the setting it up of this empowered commission, is the State Chief Minister. Because the State Chief Minister, who's from the BJP, sees the Bhopal problem as a Muslim problem. And they don't want to do anything for the Muslims. So
why does he see it as a Muslim problem? Because Bhopal has a majority Muslim population.
Yeah, I mean, not a majority, but it is like unusual compared to other cities.
Right.
Overall, I think it's 14% in the national, but Bhopal has half-half.
Right.
Half Hindus, and a rich tradition of Hindu-Muslim communal harmony. And, yeah.
Gentlemen.
Also, Dow pays money to BJP's campaign fund.
Thanks. Nick, you said earlier that Dow basically redirected you to Eveready. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, they basically sort of palmed off the responsibility and saying that it was the responsibility of Eveready Industries.
Yeah. Have Eveready said anything, and are they in any way legally liable for having?
If you just look up Eveready, you will find such a small company. They were trading in tea and doing race horses. They have no money at all. I mean, and neither the money or any kind of expertise to match. They're like the, what do you call it, the whipping boys.
The whipping boys.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, just to answer that question, I mean, as far as I understand, I need to check, but the polluter pays law applied to those who operated the site. So Eveready were not operating the site at the time at the time of the disaster.
Yeah, you're right.
So in fact, it's nothing to do with Eveready. It goes back to Union Carbide. Yeah.
Basically, which jurisdiction is going to prevail? Because at one point we're saying that the Indian courts do not have jurisdiction over Union Carbide. This Eveready is a completely an operating company which was not operating at the time the disaster happened. So which jurisdiction is actually going to come into play?
No, the U.S. court, an U.S. court decision would be enforceable in the U.S. So that is ongoing on the contamination issue, and in fact, we are expecting oral arguments to begin in the next 2 months in that.
It's been very much the case, hasn't it? The argument has been in the Indian court, they've been saying, well, this should be argued under American jurisdiction, and then when it's argued under American jurisdiction, their argument is, well, this should be argued under Indian jurisdiction. So it goes backwards and forwards,
And that is what I think one of the most important issues today, that multinationals can do these things all over the world, and yet there is no forum, no international forum to hold multinationals accountable.
Or a transnational law which would apply across international borders. Yeah, I think that's one of the most remarkable things to me about this, actually. One of the most inspiring things is that 25 years on, the people of Bhopal should be so determined and so courageous and so brave. I mean, it's an example to the world, isn't it, about what poor people can do in fighting corporate power and a corporate giant. I mean, so I think it is an inspiring story as much as it's a story of desperation and tragedy.
Definitely, definitely. I think it's to see women who have had all these odds against them, who are not well physically, mentally, who have ration shops to queue up in to get their food and to struggle to get the fire going, and yet marching on the streets. And what is the amazing and being effective. Dow Chemical took over Union Carbide in 2001 with the sole intention of spreading its business in India, and for the last now 8 years, they have not been able to invest in a big way and yet, as I said, like the February demonstration in Chennai, they continue to demonstrate, and supporters all over the country, that you cannot forget Bhopal. And I think, and the other amazing thing that has come out is that now the younger generation are taking over. And there's a new organization of kids in Bhopal, of the children of a lot of them, and it's almost a large number of women. The mothers are training their daughters into becoming activists themselves. So there's now a new organization called Children Against Dow Carbide.
Right, lots of questions here. Yes, you, sir.
So I got a question here. The way I see it is that it's a toxic combination of the mentally bankrupt government and morally bankrupt company. Now, as we just discussed, that it will be a kind of a ping pong game that will happen between the government and different geographies and those kind of things. But as we here who are moral minded people, how we can fix a morally bankrupt company? Is there any particular thought or any particular solution on that front?
You're the expert. You're the ones who are fixing. They're the ones who are fixing the world.
See, essentially these companies are generally running all these things for profit, for the revenue. And absolutely, the way I see it, they are morally bankrupt, definitely.
Well, they're running for profit. I mean, you just said it. That's their definition. So they're not morally bankrupt or not. They're just, if you let them do whatever they want, they'll make Bhopal after Bhopal.
Correct.
And so it's the answer is to legislate and make sure they can't. How to do that, of course, is fight for 25 years and make it happen.
So, but as an ordinary citizen, how I can be effectively doing it?
Well, that's back to.
This is another game of ping pong.
I mean, I would say, just to start out, I would join local groups that are putting pressure on the government, starting, right from whoever your local representatives are, and not just writing them letters, but walking into their office if you have to, sitting down in their office like you see them doing in India, going march to Delhi. Here, we only have to go to Westminster, it's just down the road. Walk into your, whoever's your representative and tell them what you need. And if they don't respond to that, we have to get out on the streets. We have to pursue every avenue possible. And I mean, one of the really tragic things that's going on right now in Bhopal is that, there's this other massive global disaster that's beginning to come home to roost, climate change. And Bhopal has seen very weird weather the last few years. 3 years ago, there was the biggest flood anyone could remember. Now there's this incredible drought that's a lot of people, I think, read about in The Observer on Sunday. A family was hacked apart because they were accused of stealing water. It's the beginning of the so-called water wars that everybody has been predicting result from the climate being destabilized. And so, this is, of course, a global problem. And suddenly, what happened in Bhopal and the lessons that we should have learned in Bhopal, which were, making laws that are a different bottom line, that aren't about letting corporations profit and grow at any cost, but set strict limits on profit and growth. It's really affecting the planet. And so it's the moment basically for everybody to say, okay, we know that all corporations, if we keep these laws that allow corporations to incorporate as entities whose goals are only to profit and grow, are no longer viable. We have to come up with a different model. And that model should be new corporate charters that ensure that corporations are designed primarily to provide what we need as humans to continue to live on this planet.
And also, I think sustainable development rather than unlimited growth plan. I mean, it's a very complicated business, that, isn't it?
And that might be a little bit abstract, but there are all kinds of organizations that are working on in very specific ways. And
so directly for this gentleman, what would you suggest here in London to join Greenpeace, or to join what organisation would you suggest would be the point to start as far as bringing pressure to bear on Bhopal here? Is there somebody from Greenpeace here?
On Bhopal, we have networks. Tim Edwards, he works in the International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal. We have a website which is bhopal.net.
Stand up, Tim.
Tim lives in Brighton. And also for supporting the Samhavna Clinic and the Chingari Trust that provides medical care to children born with birth defects. The Bhopal Medical Appeal, which is also based in Brighton, but which has many people in. Barbara Dinham is there. She's from London. And Subir Sarkar, he's from Oxford, a professor of physics in Oxford. And who? And Peter, Peter, yeah. Peter Finnegan. The Bhopal, it's from by the donations raised through the Bhopal Medical Appeal that the Samhavna Trust is run. We have, right when we founded it, we said we take no money from corporations, corporate charities, big funding agencies, governments. So we run on individual donations.
We could raise a question with our own members of parliament to make representations to the British government to take it up with India. That we can certainly do. One of the questions I wanted to ask is that this sort of issue, is it the International Court of Justice? Can they not be approached?
No, we went there. We went there, and this was the year when the judge who basically denied justice to the Bhopal people, who sanctified the settlement, that judge, as a prize, he was made a member of the International Court of Justice, $1 million a year. So we went to the International Court of Justice and said, look, we have been denied justice, can we come to you? And they said, no, we don't deal with corporations, we just deal with between nation states.
Oh dear.
So the Indian government would have to make a complaint against the US government.
Gentleman in the corner? Yeah. Sorry.
She's been waiting before me.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thanks. You've described sort of 25 years of an incredible struggle, and I wondered if there was a way you could put into words what your ultimate aim would be, and if there's ever a day that you think you'll say to yourself, like, my work is done. Is there any achievements that you think that you could attain and you'd think you kind of done the job you wanted to do in the first place?
I don't think there's not one achievement in one day. It's we have, if you go in the last 25 years, the big reason that we have continued is that we have had many achievements. So I mentioned one of them was how we had forced the court to reinstate the criminal charges, but also that the fact that the Prime Minister agreed to setting up the Empowered Commission. That was the Prime Minister actually released funds to provide fresh water to the people who are drinking contaminated water. So all these are achievements in over the years in small and big achievements. And like I said, the judge ordering that, yeah, Dow cannot stop people from protesting. So these are, all this has happened over the years. So if you want just like some of the big ones, then the settlement, Dow not being able to invest in the last so many years, Prime Minister agreeing to the Empowered Commission, and most of all to carry on with the struggle with supporters from all over the world, including pollution impacted communities, trade unions, students groups, and all this word spreading out so that Union Carbide and Dow are still bad names, and morally they're defeated again and again and again, like how they closed their doors. They couldn't even face the things we had to tell them, except through whatever.
So when will the work be done? What's the end game? What's the absolute objective? What's the final? The final.
What we are aiming for is to have the system in place for long-term healthcare and health research and monitoring, and providing rehabilitation, because some of the children were born with birth defects. They need rehabilitation, and we know that they are doing much better when they get that attention. But of course, non-governmental organizations cannot have that, and government should set up these facilities. Plus people getting fresh water to drink, plus the spreading of the contamination stopping, and like we have been always asking for, exemplary punishment is given to the individuals and agencies who are responsible for this, so that it stands out as a lesson.
Just a very sort of mundane question to ask the yes men. Now, I've personally worked in some fairly risky situations in the past where other people's eyes would have boggled and I've been quite comfortable because I've been prepared for it. I don't think I would have had the guts to have done what you did on the TV. I would have been terrified even if somebody asked me to do it, never mind actually committing the act. How was it for you?
Terrifying. Yeah, I'm a fairly normal person, and it was terrifying. But you know, it's. I mean, there isn't much risk. You know, what are they going to do? Even calling the police, getting arrested for something like that. What are the consequences? You know, when you think of the reality of what people are dealing with in Bhopal and what has happened and what it's about, it's really trivial. And
but still, I couldn't have done it.
You could have actually. I mean, the other part of that answer is, you know, having somebody that you work with who's telling you it's reasonable and that they're terrified as you might feel, it's just a feeling, which is true. But it's hard to tell yourself that.
This is completely normal behavior.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just psychology.
From what you're saying, if, God forbid, this sort of accident happened in India or another country, are you saying that 25 years on, international liability law has really not improved? I know about Shell and some of the Coca-Cola. What's your opinion of progress of, you know, it doesn't really matter who takes responsibility, local or international, as long as someone does. Isn't that true?
No, we don't agree with that. We want the polluter to pay. And I mean, not only there is no international law or forum, the laws that we have in our country, they are being weakened now. In India now there is a plan for, it's already been implemented, but people are resisting it, of special economic zones in which none of the environmental laws or the labor laws would apply, and companies would be encouraged to invest in those. But in terms of movement on this, I think there has been in the last particularly 6 to 8 years a lot of movement among jurists and lawyers in international law, and there is an attempt to create an international court for environmental crimes. This is particularly strong in Italy, and by this association called the International Association of Environmental Sciences.
Okay, anybody? Yes. Peter.
Thanks, Mick. Oh, is that on? Yeah. My name's Peter Finnegan from the Bhopal Medical Appeal. Obviously, the issues being discussed here this evening are huge, but all I would say to everybody in the room, if there's something practical that you want to do right now, you can actually visit the website, bhopal.org, and either make a contribution or just engage in dialogue with us and talk to us and see what you can do.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a really, for me, an education and a really fascinating evening. I think I speak for everybody when I say you're a deeply inspiring figure. And it's a great privilege to meet you and talk to you. And thanks to the Yes Men, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much indeed.